Speak to Me by Dana Wilson is a composition for concert band that simulates the jazz type of conversations that take place with a jazz band of some kind. After a percussion soft intro, the main theme is introduced and is developed a little bit, and dialogue is produced in the opening section. And then there's a middle section that slows it down and becomes a little bit more ethereal, and gradually the tempo picks up and the ideas become developed in this slowly accelerating middle section, and then finally at the end the tempo comes back to the original tempo and it becomes more of a shout chorus effect. The percussion opening is a theme in and of itself. The snare drum has a 2-measure theme that repeats itself, so it's chow chicka chicka cha chow chicka 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 cha chow, and then that's reinforced by the tom-toms. This repeated percussion figure is what sets up the introduction of the theme with the alto saxophone, and the articulation patterns are kind of unique and catchy and jazzy. And what we do here is carry that slur one extra note in one instance here, so that it spills into beat 4, and that idea is one that we're going to apply everywhere in the composition. The theme is repeated by the oboe, a little bit of a bridge material, and then a return again to the theme here, a repetition several times of the theme, spill-offs by 16th notes, and here, just before measure 28, there's kind of a question and answer that takes place between the clarinet, bass clarinet, bassoon parts, and a reply from the flutes and oboes. So it's kind of the first instance of a dialogue which begins to take place. Agility is the key thing here on measure 27, with the woodwinds having a rhythmical figure, a note pattern that is a little bit tricky to execute with precision, but precision is important. At 28, we have the first instance of a true duet, 2 separate melodies, one with the alto sax and the clarinet, and the second one with the flute part. And this harmony that takes place at 28, instead of based upon major minor triads, is one which is based on chordal harmony, perfect fourths stacked on each other. And the brass have an entrance which looks pretty innocuous here, but I think what that is the purpose of that is to provide a brief commentary on the conversation between the upper 2 voices. The entrance of the shaker in the percussion part reinforces this new material. As this duet material is passed along to some different instrumental colors, the trombone produces a rhythmical effect with a glissando on a follow beat, which is dramatic but subtle. And the tuba and euphonium and bari saxophone have a figure that I refer to as a kick with the accented syncopated quarter note. And this kick helps to launch the composition subtly into the next part. Without changing notes, the trumpets and French horns provide a single note color type of bridge material getting into measure 38. The rhythmical accompaniment of the clarinet part, because of the articulation, produces an effect that I refer to as a sticky accompaniment. Meanwhile, the trombone introduces a new idea, including a rhythmical glissando on that second measure, which is set off by the tambourine on beat 1, and for this reason the tambourine should not play too softly. The measures that lead up to 45 are bridge-like material and requires some agility and cooperation and accuracy with the clarinets, bass clarinet, and tenor sax, and then followed by that descending chromatic type of line from the bassoon, bass, bari saxophone, trumpets, and the color added by the French horns. The duet returns at 45, and the important thing to note here is that the dynamics are mezzo forte at the loudest, and the second duet part is only mezzo piano. The role of the trombone accent on the follow beat is meant to reinforce the melody that's taking place on the flute and oboe parts. This leads to a return of that kick-like figure that we had earlier, only now it's reinforced by some of the upper woodwinds and all of the lower brass. The descending and overlapping 16th note passages with the trumpets and the saxophones and the clarinets on this passage are an interesting color fusion, and one could blend it or one could emphasize the entrances in terms of interpreting it with an ensemble. And I like to emphasize each entrance here to call attention to the initial cascading effect. This will lead to the slowdown section, and the bridge material is provided by some static notes with some low brass and woodwind figures, but most importantly the bass drum. And for this reason, the bass drum, as it slows down, shouldn't play too softly at first. I like to refer to this next section as a tonal gradient because the colors and the rhythms shouldn't be distinctive, but rather blended in such a way that it produces some ambiguity for the tone center. This ambiguity sets up the flute solo, which can be interpreted in a way that provides various dynamic phrasings in a free sort of way to make the flute sound sort of improvisatory. When the flute leans on the high notes a little bit with a little extra emphasis, it makes the solo sound like it's uplifting. As the flutes join in and produce a tonal gradient that's flute color and reinforced clarinet color, the tempo begins to pick up little by little, and the bassoon plays a key role in providing some of this thematic bridge material. Color is the important thing about the tonal cluster from the trumpet section in the triangle. This next section is developmental type material, and the oboe takes the role at first with developing this theme as the color clusters return not only with trumpets but with flutes, and the tempo begins to pick up little by little. The ostinato type figure in the bassoon is cued in the tenor sax, but personally I like the singular color of the bassoon to softly carry the momentum forward. The oboe can also sound improvisatory in this passage here, and when the tempo gets faster yet and the trumpet takes the lead with the at measure 94, the aspect of this is less improvisatory and more structured. Here this one measure theme is going to get passed around with different instruments, and the key thing here is that there are some portamento effects that take place with the trumpet and the trombone that give this passage some sauciness. The portamento that follows in the alto saxophone part leads into this color measure bridge from the trumpet section and a response by the lower brass, and then the accelerando back to the original tempo at 103, and we return to the main thematic ideas once more. As the clarinet and saxophone play in unison with this main idea, the important thing is similarity between articulations and rhythms in these two parts. This now becomes a recapitulation from earlier in the piece as a duet transpires here with the primary melody in the flutes and oboes, and then the counter melody with the alto saxophone, and a return to that kick idea with the low brass and the oboe and the bari sax, and there's that trombone glissando which should make itself prominent. As we lead into the section at 112, the character of the piece switches. It becomes a bit louder, it becomes more fanfare in quality with the trumpets and the clarinets leading the way. This section becomes like a dialogue between multiple instruments, each taking their turns making their point. The dialogue gives way at 118 to this shout type of response, this two-note shout which comes from all of the wind players and is responded to by a percussion section grouping of 16th notes. The percussion should be assertive in this section. The simplicity of the first two measures gives way to the 16th note percussive effect with the wind players here, which also builds the intensity of dynamics, and the upward flow of 16th notes leading into 123 is not so much based upon precision as it is an effect of the ensemble of rising intensity with clusters of notes leading into the return of the melody and counter melody at 123 in that duet form, which now takes shape as an ensemble production. This ensemble production of the duet gets reinforced by the kick down below with the brass, and these kicks and changes of meters lead the entire ensemble to the ending in a dramatic way, with the final measure being an ending which is an upbeat ending rather than downbeat ending.